Hey everyone, it's Carter King. If you're an educator, a leader, or just a parent who wants to teach kids about space, check out my newest book, Carter's Journey Through Space. It's available now on Amazon, Target, and bookstores everywhere. Come explore the universe with me.
Welcome to another episode of the Contagious Culture Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle King, and the goal of this podcast is simple: to help you create environments where people thrive. Through real conversations, practical strategies, and powerful stories, we equip leaders, educators, and change makers just like yourself to build cultures rooted in purpose, performance, and authenticity. Because culture isn't something you talk about, it's something you live. This is the Contagious Culture Podcast. Let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of the Contagious Culture Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle King, and the goal of this podcast is simple: to help you create an ecosystem and environment where people thrive. Look, today, it's not about me. It's about the amazing human being that's sitting in front of me. Well, technically not sitting, but next to me, virtually. We have somebody on here today, Dr. Caroline Brookfield, also known as the professional cat herder. Now, look, I need to know what that means, but we'll get into it. And she's here to teach us how creativity, adaptability, and a little audacity can transform how we lead, make decisions, and thrive in uncertainty. Caroline, how you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks. How are you doing?
I am amazing. And I have 1,000 questions for you. So hopefully you've booked 2 hours of time. And I just need to know, can we talk about a professional cat herder? Like, where does this come from? And just give me all the deets.
Well, that's kind of a long story. This is my elevator to the tallest tower speech pitch. Professional cat herder comes from my background as being a veterinarian. So, and also combined with what I've developed in my speaking and consulting business is how to manage and adapt during change and thrive in ambiguity. And I always struggled to kind of link my expertise as a veterinarian with my topic, which is around creativity and ambiguity, because people are like, why do you speak about that? That's kind of weird. And it just came to me like creativity does sometimes. It just popped into my head. And I'm like, how do I kind of encapsulate what I do in a nutshell? And it's really herding cats, which is dealing with uncertainty and ambiguity and trying to manage things that are unmanageable, essentially.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. I'm a leader. There's a lot of leaders that listen to this podcast. We battle oftentimes with that adaptability. We battle that a lot of times with managing people, managing tasks, innovations, being agile and flexible. All of these different thoughts happening at the same time. What is your one go-to phrase or go-to framework that you would use to be able to get us back in line?
Well, I think so. One of the things that I love is some research that came out of the University of Queensland in Australia around this concept of tolerance of ambiguity. And a lot of people think that means that we can be okay in the unknown, but through the research, there's actually 9 different elements of it. So one could be social ambiguity. How are you in a place where you don't know people? One could be your desire for challenging work. Like how much do you jump into a problem? So we feel ambiguity and uncertainty and that unstableness, I guess, in many different ways. But to answer your question, the 2 most influential factors for building our tolerance of ambiguity, which to me is the key to adaptability and leading into change, is creativity and mindfulness. Those are the 2 most impactful things. So when you ask what my framework and what my go-to is, I think things like, okay, what's the one thing I need to know? What do I need to know right now to move forward in this small step versus like the big picture? Like, how do I move forward? And how do I stop catastrophizing? So my job as a veterinarian, I often think like 10 steps ahead to try to decide, what are the things we need to do? Yep. And it's really easy to go down that catastrophic path, right? So instead of thinking like, what do I need to do right this second? That's right important in front of me. So I guess that's my go-to.
You said creativity and mindfulness. How can we be more creative and more mindful within our practices on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I listened to the podcast, your podcast. You interviewed Dan about innovation, and you brought up a few good points. And one of yours was time. The other one was experience, and I'm forgetting what the third one was. Do you remember?
It was time, people, and exposure.
People and exposure. Sorry, exposure.
Or excuse me, time, exposure, and experiences, which was the exposure was the people one.
Okay, yeah, and I thought that was really impactful because there's two things. There's two aspects to your question. I think number one is what are our personal habits, and I think time. And number one is making the time for it. And so, for my experience in my own creative practice as a stand-up comedian and doing other creative things that are not necessarily artistic, like I am very creative, but I cannot draw a stick figure to save my life. So my five include time, but number one is daydreaming, like allowing yourself time to mind wander, which you touched on. And that is incredibly important for creativity so that we can allow our default mode network to connect those connections in the background where, sometimes it feels like when we're doing nothing, we're actually doing everything. So daydreaming is a big one. I have a few different things. One of them is novelty, like trying new things, because when your brain is making connections, if you don't do anything different or you don't have ingredients to fuel that connection, you're not going to really have any good ideas. And then being curious is another one.
Yeah.
And then I think one of the most important ones for anybody working in the corporate or nonprofit or a team setting is this idea of editing later. And so it spells dance, ambiguity is the A. So daydream, ambiguity, novelty, curiosity, and editing later. And there's this great quote attributed to Ernest Hemingway, which is called "Write drunk, edit sober."
I just want to sit in that for a second. I like that. I like that. Can you tell me more about that? Like, there's somebody listening right now that is as intrigued as I am with that one statement right there, but even editing later. Talk to me more about that one.
Yeah, I think one of the barriers to our creativity, and whether that is speaking out and sharing a new process or an idea or doing something different in work to improve your workflow, we tend to edit our ideas as we're creating them. So we think, I did that last week, or I want to suggest that, but Paula suggested that last week, and she got the side eye. So we tend to think of ideas and block them simultaneously, which is a foundational no-no for creativity. What we need to do is then say, okay, I'm in a divergent stage, which is thinking, brainstorming, ideating. That is when you put your critics aside. That is when you do not edit, and all of the ideas are important, even the bad ideas. In fact, bad ideas are even better because it's so much easier to come up with a bad idea than a good idea.
I do agree with that.
Right? Yeah. That you can use it for a launch pad into good ideas. So the first thing is making sure that you're not editing your ideas as you're creating them, that you're carving out deliberate, specific time to ideate. And then once you think you're done ideating, you need to ideate some more and use some techniques, ideally, to help kind of amplify that divergent thinking that's often constrained by our curse of knowledge when we're experts, right? It's hard to think of new ways to do things if you see things the way that you see it through your expertise. And then later is the time to say, okay, now we're editing mode. Now let's poke holes and look for the, feasibility, and does it meet budget? Is it possible? And I think that's one of the big keys is this idea of you don't have to drink alcohol, but the idea of releasing your inhibitions when you're trying to think of ideas and get them all out. And then later, when you're quote unquote sober, that's when you edit and select and refine.
It's interesting. I used to own a publishing company that was acquired 2 years ago now. And one of the activities that we would always give our writers is to write free and then come back and then sit a week before you come back and reread and start to edit. And it's interesting that I even mention that now because I am editing constantly during my processing. And I've forgotten some of the things that I used to just teach. And I find that some of my best work and some of my greatest articles or books that I've written was really just from the heart and just flowing and not doing it for a project or for some type of outcome, just truly being creative and just expressing yourself. Like I am like you, I cannot draw a stick figure at all. but I can write, I can bring people together, I can just do other things. Why do you believe that leaders resist creative ideas? And how does that dance framework help them flip that script?
Oh, there's so much to that. So everyone's always got that story about that boss who is like, I want all your creative ideas, but not that one or that one or that
Not that
one.
one, that one.
So there's a few things to unpack there. Number one, leaders specifically have a bias that they are not aware of. So when they've done research to say leaders look at creativity, they say, we want creativity. Yes, creativity's good. But when they do those kind of subconscious tests, like I think of like that ink blot test, right? Like when they do tests to actually find out what do they actually think about creativity,
Yeah.
they hate it. They hate it
Oh,
because their butts
gosh.
on the line, right?
Yeah.
So they don't know they have this bias. So they think they're supporting creative ideas, but really they're supporting safe ideas that feel a bit of a flavor of creativity. So that's number one for leaders, is the awareness that as a decision maker, whether you're a leader or just a person that's in charge of making decisions, you have that bias against creativity. The other thing is that everybody has the effect of sticking to status quo solutions when we are faced with uncertainty, which is like, hello, everywhere, right? So I use a riptide analogy. So when we're feeling uncertain, when things are changing, it's like we're in a riptide. And that's one of those, you're in North Carolina, you will know about riptides. Do riptides in North Carolina? They must.
Yes, they do.
So I'm landlocked here in Alberta, so I'm not an ocean person, but I do know about riptides. And what that is it's like a silent current that pulls people out to the ocean. And why is it often fatal, Kyle? Like why do people die in riptide?
Because you get caught undercurrent.
Right. And what do they try to do when they
try to come up or breathe, but you're still caught under. Interestingly, fun fact, I got caught in one in New Jersey, actually, when I was 12 years old. I was swimming out way too far. I was trying to go under. My parents told me to come back. I was not listening. And I woke up 30 minutes later on the beach where my father was, he recitated me. And literally, I've never told that story, I don't think, ever publicly until now. I don't even know. Like, you've definitely created a safe space. I appreciate you. And
I'm so sorry that I triggered this traumatic memory. That's terrible.
Almost lost, my life at that point. And, maybe I should talk about it more, but it was the undercurrent that caught me. And you're supposed to just wait until it comes up and let it bring you up. But I was trying to swim, and then I breathed, and then that's all I remember. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank goodness your dad was there, and that. That's terrible. I guess when I'm speaking, I should maybe do a little bit of disclaimer.
No.
But you mentioned the key to it is that you fought it, right? And so what do we do in change? We get caught in change. A lot of times we don't realize it's happening. And then just like you, we get pulled under and we start to struggle and fight against the change.
That's good.
And that is the problem with change and ambiguity, because what we feel like we need to do is what's worked in the past. And if you feel like you're being pulled under, your body's like, swim up, swim to shore, get out. But that doesn't work. And it's the same with change. If we try to fight it and we try to push against it, we'll end up exhausting ourselves. So it's this idea of, if you're swept out in the riptide like you were, if you had stopped for a second, gotten mindful and been like, okay, wait, let me just think for a second, like what's going on here, looking around to try to see like, what are my options here? That is how we navigate change better as leaders. And in that moment of sitting and letting the riptide take you is when creative ideas come to you. It's not from like swimming against and trying to get to the shore. It's not from like trying to struggle and flail around. It's from sitting in that discomfort and looking around and saying, what are my options here?
That's such a great perspective. And I say that because so often we're teaching to keep pushing, keep fighting, keep working, keep doing, rather than sitting and being in the moment, and maybe even letting that bad idea marinate for a little bit so that we can get some data from it, so that we then know how to make a data-driven decision moving forward. Or maybe letting that conflict amongst team members, not me stepping in immediately, but identifying how maybe they could find a creative way to be able to still be productive within the workplace. What is one thing that a leader listening in right now can do immediately to build? I see it more, even what you've done on this episode, like to create that psychological safety where people feel encouraged every single day to be creative and do this work.
Yeah, I would say the single most thing is to pause, and that I've worked in emergency medicine with zoo, wildlife. Like a lot of times you feel like you don't have a moment to pause, but you always have a moment to pause and be aware of that reaction. I went to a continuing education for veterinarians once. It was about nutrition. And the guy started talking about communication, which I was like, this isn't what I was here for. But I can't remember his name, but a lovely man from the South. And he said something that's always stuck with me. He's like, when people say something, like in this case, your clients, maybe your team member, if you're a leader, they say something, you feel that like response. You can feel it. I don't know about you, Kyle, but I can just feel that response bubbling up. It's like an objection or something. Just say, tell me more about that. And just like give yourself a chance to take a breath and regulate your reaction so you're not rejecting these ideas, and just sometimes just getting curious. And so I think that pause and getting curious would be the number one thing leaders can do, knowing that they have this bias and knowing that we have these human reactions to change.
Yeah. You've worked with a lot of teams, literally across the globe. What do you find that is a universal trait that helps teams adapt well to change? And with working in the educational field and the nonprofit space, a lot of these organizations, especially in mission-driven work, are adverse to change. Now, corporations, change is in their DNA, and that's their very framework, and to continue to be agile and flexible and innovative. What do you find, though, that is the throughway or some traits that we can be able to impart within ourselves, but then also within our organizations that we can begin to implement?
Well, I guess, not to beat the dead horse, so to speak, but it'd be creativity. I mean, if you see an organization where people are speaking up and they're sharing ideas and they're excited about contributing to even something as simple as like a staff appreciation day, it shows that people have psychological safety, shows that people have that courage to speak out, and it shows that the leadership is there to encourage and enable people to take ownership of ideas and move them forward. And that doesn't have to mean some massive initiative that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, but it just shows that that individual drive and acceptance in putting forth an idea.
I'm gonna flip the script. One of the things that we noted over earlier is that you were or used to be a veterinarian.
I'm still working as a vet. I still work as a smell.
Still work as a vet.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this question: If animals could run an organization, what do you believe? Like, what lessons would cats and birds, dogs, or even giraffes teach us about leadership?
Well, I will say one thing. Have you ever seen a cat pretend that they're a dog?
No.
Cats know what they need to do to get things done, and they lean into their strengths for their survival. Like a raccoon doesn't apologize for being a pest and emptying your garbage can. It's just getting things done. So I think if there was one lesson from animals, I would say it is how to lean into your unapologetic strengths and how to find the positive, not only in yourself and others, where maybe you traditionally see an obstacle. Like someone who's too curious, they want to make your nonprofit excellent.
Tell me more about this.
So I think of like curiosity, for instance, that person that's always asking a question, that delaying the meeting. How do we turn that around and kind of give a crucible or kind of a container to amplify that versus squashing it? Because a naturally curious person, if they can lean into that curiosity, what are the possibilities? They can be the person that can mitigate potential damage to an initiative before you realize it's happening. They can be the ones that can think of new ideas or challenge your thinking so that you can think differently. But if you see it as a liability, it will always be a liability. Does that kind of make sense?
No, it definitely makes sense. And this conversation has opened me up to even different things than I need to implement organizationally as a leader. And it's challenging me to even think about how I can create safer spaces to talk about those ideas or to allow time and agendas to be curious, and to allow these spaces to be able to build based upon each individual team member's strengths.
Mhm.
Because I may be focused in this meeting and I want to go over data, I want to go over metrics, I want to go over this, and then, all right, we're good, and then move forward. But you have to still create space for the raccoon that may be more curious, or the cat that may be doing this, or the giraffe that may be doing that. That is such a great insight. Let me ask you this. Who was the leader or the individual that really invited you into this work and really helped to shape some of your philosophies, or even the book, the podcast that you read that you would be willing to share today?
Which leader, which person? Oh, that's so hard. I think one leader comes to mind, and it was from a long, long time ago. It was from when I was a student, and I was out here in Calgary doing a practicum at the Calgary Zoo. And she was the head vet, one of the vets, and she
Yeah.
was so inclusive and would let me pass my ideas by. She would give me flexibility to. There was this peacock with bumblefoot, which is kind of a sore on the foot,
Yeah.
and it just wasn't healing. And she allowed me to try some different ways, like within that crucible. She's always kind of there, had my back, but she was always willing to let me try and stretch
Yeah.
me. And I think I would say she is one of a leader that is most influential. How about you?
Wow, so many. So a little personal background for me. So my parents grew up Central Jersey, didn't have much. My dad was one of 13 children. His mom unfortunately passed away when he was 6, and he never had a father. And my mom, she was an only child, and she never knew her father until later on in life. And she had a mom, but contentious relationship for years. And my mom was pregnant with my older sister at 13 years old. And I tell that story to frame that my mom became the first woman of color that was in an executive leadership position at Volvo Cars for 20 years. And now she's an executive at Amazon, with no college degree, with no, just that grit, that ability to survive, that ability to defy the odds. And my dad has helped hundreds of student athletes go to pro, go to overseas, and just become better human beings in general. And I tell that story because they were my first vision of what resiliency looks like. And they were my first vision of being able to operate from a sense of kindness. And my father would always say, treating people how you want to be treated. And my mom navigated rooms and exposed me to the power of relationship and building community, and how one relationship after another relationship led to her driving her career forward. And it wasn't always about tenure or title or background. It was about people believing in you. So I always wanted to be able to create a space where I led with my heart, where I was vulnerable, where I helped and uplifted other people. Because I believe that the best leaders understand how to truly lift others, even if it doesn't lift themselves in the moment. So everything that I've built from in my entrepreneurial career or even as a professional has been uplifting, even on this podcast, like uplifting the voices of professionals that are in their field or doing really innovative work, that we just need to celebrate them. Or even with this conference, I really genuinely want to spread contagious culture through being able to spread kindness and build community and deploy capital. Through the work that we even do organizationally, I wanted to be able to create community so that we can just share information with people that can't afford it. So for me, my creativity and mindfulness, going back to the beginning of the conversation, has always been, how can I be mindful of the needs of people, and how can I connect it with my skills and my desire and my passions, and then create a platform or a community so that I can uplift other human beings. Because if I can uplift others, I feel like that's the greatest form of leadership.
That is so beautiful. You're creating the world you want to live in.
Yeah.
So that's the best form of creativity there is, even if you can't draw it on a piece of paper, right?
Yeah, no, because I can't draw at all, Caroline. I just can't do it. Let me ask you this. You know, you've opened me up even on this podcast, and I appreciate that. You've challenged me, and you've created a space even in this conversation where, you know, I've shared stories that I've never shared, and you know, I've even talked a lot about my even own personal journey and background. What is one thing that a leader can do today after they listen to this conversation that they can create what we've shared in this moment in their organizations every single day?
Yeah, I'm just going to share the thing that comes straight to my mind. Speaking of being, mind editing later, writing drunk, get it sober. Is, stop worrying about, nobody cares about what you do. They really don't. Like, nobody cares what you do and how you do it. But the irony behind that is what you do is incredibly important. So just get over yourself. Stop trying to look like the way you think a leader should look or somebody in your position should look, and start leaning into just what you have beautifully described in your passion and your calling to share this contagious culture, and start leaning into that, because people aren't judging you as much as you think they are.
I appreciate that. And anybody listening, I want you to do the work. I want you to follow the dance framework, and I want you to be able to identify what are things that you can do to be more creative and mindful today. How can you be inclusive? How can you take time to really listen and create spaces in your organization where other people can operate in their zone of genius and just in the place where they're comfortable so that they can be able to contribute what they are called to contribute to your cause? Caroline, where can we find you? How can we continue to support you online?
I am way too active on social media. So you can find me on LinkedIn, just Caroline Brookfield, and my website's carolinebrookfield.com. And I just love having these deep conversations like this one with you. And thank you so much for sharing. And sorry to bring up the riptide trauma, but also maybe a reminder to be careful, to make some plans. If you go to the ocean, make sure you know about riptides.
No, literally, definitely. And, I see it as an opportunity to slow down, process, be patient, and allow the season of being to be able to teach you where you need to go next. Anybody listening, and if you love this episode as much as I have, share it, subscribe to the podcast, like the episode, and write your review, your thoughts, or even ask Caroline some questions on her platform. One of the questions that we always ask on the Contagious Culture podcast for our listeners is, what type of culture are you spreading? The energy you bring is the culture you create. Go make yours worth catching. We'll see you all next episode. Thanks for tuning in to the Contagious Culture podcast. If this episode challenged or inspired you, hey, take a second to share it with someone who's building culture in their world. Make sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review. It helps more leaders, educators, and change makers just like yourself join the movement. You can connect with me on LinkedIn or YouTube at Kyle S. King for more tips, tools, and methodologies to be able to help you create this ecosystem of absolute excellence. Until next time, lead boldly, live intentionally, and remember, your culture is contagious. Make it worth catching.